Hey, Fiends of the Pod, this is your host, film critic, and comedian Nate Wyckoff, reminding you to like, subscribe, and comment. You can also go to cultandclassicfilms.com/subscribe and sign up to have cult exclusive movies sent to your door every single month. These are ultra low budget exclusive films that we get to you in the best quality possible with tons of extras like commentaries, milk caps, autographed posters, slipcovers, all sorts of neat things. And remember, every time you like, subscribe, and buy a movie from us, you prevent Michael Bay from making one more film. So go ahead, subscribe, and enjoy.
Welcome to Cult and Classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends of the pod, to another episode of Cult and Classic Films Podcast, the podcast where we bring you two thematically linked films, one mainstream and one cult, and talk about them both. I'm your host, film critic, and comedian Nate Wyckoff, and with us today, we have two of our favorite panelists, Tad Mastroianni. How are you doing, Tad?
I promise I'm not on cocaine.
Okay. And Mandy Longley. How are you doing, Mandy?
I don't promise that I'm not on something else.
There you go. Yeah, you know what? This is we're on two different coasts, so it's not super late my time. It's like 6 o'clock when we record this my time, and but Tad and Mandy are on the East Coast, so it's 9, and they work and have children, so they're paying for their life choices. I'm just kidding. It's wonderful. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm really
we're like seltzer all the way.
Oh,
from the
seltzer.
market basket.
Well, I'm in California, so
Keep
the
it clean.
recent seltzer that we were given as a gift in our fridge is Pabst Blue Ribbon marijuana beverage seltzer, which is interesting.
So it's even
What?
skunkier than normal.
I thought they were
Pabst?
joking when they gave it away. They were like Pabst Blue Ribbon weed seltzer. I thought it was a joke because it's a good friend of ours who's a comedian who runs a bingo thing, and you win marijuana because it's at a dispensary. And I thought they were joking when they were like Pabst Blue Ribbon marijuana seltzer. I was like, ha ha ha. And then we got home and opened the package, and it literally is Pabst Blue Ribbon. They now make weed seltzer sold in California. I was like,
Wow.
this is not only did I really not expect them to make a seltzer, I didn't expect them to make a marijuana seltzer, especially since you can't even sell it in all the country. You actually probably have to manufacture it in the state that you're selling it. So that is weird. That is just another level of
transport that
bizarre.
water across straight lines. Yeah, mine just has lemon in it. Like, it doesn't have anything fun like caffeine or sugar or marijuana. Just lemon.
Can we just reminisce, Nate, about the time in our lives when we were both straight edge? Those were good times.
You know what's funny? I mean, so the problem is that straight edge was always one of those things. It was neither of us were ever that person that was annoyingly like, oh, you're an idiot, blah, 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 blah. It's just like, it was an easy shorthand to be like, no, I'm sober.
I just don't care.
I'm like, and so I remember like just using it as shorthand. And I remember, do you remember Emily? You, Mandy, will remember Emily. She was friends with Emily Carwalter.
Oh, yes, Emily Carwalter.
Yes, Emily, shout out. I hope you're listening. So Emily, one time she said something, and I said, yeah, I'm straight edge. And she said, she was like, oh, I can't wait to see you break your edge. I'd never even heard that term. And I was like, oh, there's this whole fucking culture. And we were kind of punks at the time. And even then, you can be as punk as you want, but you live rural. And so I was like, I'd never even heard that term. And I'm like, I guess, yeah, some people that are so against it, like eventually when they become uninhibited, they just go off the rails. And you become the most annoying, like, hey, do you have any weed? Blah, blah, blah. Hey, do you have any blah, blah, blah? Hey, do you have any coke?
It's Rumspringa for non-Amish.
Right, exactly. And it's just like, it was never that. I was just like, I don't want to spend any money on anything that isn't a toy game or comic or movie. And two, what's the purpose? I had a pretty great life, so it wasn't really an issue. This is a long way to get somewhere.
Just like one more comment on that. Like, at what age do you stop using that term and you were just like an old person that doesn't do drugs?
I think it was probably when I moved the first time because because even when I was quote unquote straight edge, like I like fruity, not as in, queer, but like, and that is a proper term now.
Green shirts.
Right. Like I liked sweet fruit flavored beverages. So like when there was when there's Long Island iced tea or something, like I like the taste of those because they taste good, and you can't really taste the alcohol unless it's vodka because it's disgusting. But yeah, I liked that. So even when I was going straight edge, I'm like, if it tastes good, I will have it. I don't really care. So it just never even occurred to me. And then I was like, oh, I mean, I have to, I had this all other, and then I'm like, because it's just, you have to explain it. Like, no, I just don't drink. Now it's a little easier. You can actually just say, I'm sober.
You know what?
Yeah.
And
It's true.
Mandy, I have an answer for you. The answer
Mm.
is that you stop using the term straight edge when your job depends on on drug use. Then
it's
you stop
true.
saying I'm straight edge. You start going, nah, I'm in recovery.
Yeah, I'm an
Mm,
English professor,
I
but
know.
not at Berkeley, so I have to be careful. Um, yeah, so why are we talking about this? Why did this come up?
I have
Well,
no idea.
I know why,
Movie
because
about drugs.
we are talking about a pair of movies that we call Animals Behaving Badly, and that is not a reference to the Discovery Channel show, which was really not as good as I wanted it to be. Sorry, Discovery Channel, hit us up. We'll make a good one. But yes, this is Cocaine Bear is what we're going to talk about today. Elizabeth Banks, 2023 comedy horror, I guess you would call it. And that is part one. And next week, we're going to hit our even more cult feature with 2023's Slaughterhouse. That is not Slaughterhouse, it is Slaughterhouse. So be ready for that. We're going to gear up with Cocaine Bear 2023. It is,
Nathan.
Yes.
No joke.
Yes.
I just started a new job last week. And I mentioned that I had a podcast that watched movies, and someone went, "Hey, has anybody heard about that movie about the sloth?" And I'm like, "Fucking hell." Like, yes, we're going to be doing that
We are on
very
trend.
soon. Like
Yes.
that this is in so Slaughterhouse is in the public conscience already.
Yep.
And
Oh, well,
these
I
people
mentioned
are
we were
not
watching. Yeah,
these are
I mentioned we
normies.
were watching Cocaine Bear, and like my friends were like, "Heck yeah, I want to watch that movie."
So
So
I'm just going to start right off the bat. I had been telling my lovely panelists that we were going to be doing this movie for like months, because since I saw it in theaters, because it's going to be no surprise, I really love this movie. It shocked me. I honestly wasn't expecting much, especially because it launched kind of in the same time frame as like Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and the Mean One, that movie about the Grinch slasher flick. I'm sure maybe we'll talk about that for Christmas time. But you know,
ooh,
I knew that this had a bigger cast, a bigger budget, it was getting a national release. But again, it seemed like it was very possibly the kind of film that 100% is the title and nothing else. Like it's the only thing it has going for it, right? Uh, and I was pleasantly surprised. So we're going to talk about this at length. As usual, I'm going to give you the plot, then we'll dive into our panelists to see how they feel about it and talk about some ups and downs of this movie. This movie is directed by Elizabeth Banks, who everybody has seen as an actress and somewhat of a director. She produces a lot. She's been in over 100 films and TV shows, so she's been everywhere. I think she's fantastic. She is one of those actresses that really seems to choose a wide variety of projects, right? Like she is heavily responsible for the Pitch Perfect films, which I I wasn't that was my experience with her as a filmmaker, frankly, and I didn't really like it. I thought that there were a little too, I don't know, ham-fisted is the right word. I thought the tone was uneven. It was real, but then it wasn't real because of how extreme people were acting. It just wasn't my thing. But also, I'm not the target audience, right? If you listen to our pre-show by joining our Patreon subscription at patreon.com/cult and classic films, where you get cult movies every month delivered to your door that only we have. There's my plug. We had a pre-show, and I was talking about this whole thing. I don't really think that, you know, we're out of the at 40 abouts, we're all three of us about that age. We are no longer the target audience for most things. All right. And so it just didn't hit me the way that it hit a lot of people. Right. And so I didn't see Elizabeth Banks as a versatile filmmaker. I knew she was a fantastic, versatile actress. I thought she was a smart producer, but a lot of her projects sort of were misses commercially. I don't care about that, but it does tend to add to the feeling when you've seen a film of theirs that you don't really care for. That said, this movie that she produced and directed it totally shocked me with the choices she made. They are wild, and it made for a very engaging film. So the plot is, as you may have guessed, a bear in the wild finds packages of cocaine that were mistakenly dropped by a guy who fell and killed himself on accident from a plane because he was on coke. When he was supposed to drop cocaine at a certain location, in this forest so the dealers could go pick it up, right? So it's kind of this clever way of avoiding state lines and all that jazz. Well, of course, these are all over the woods, and a bear has become addicted to cocaine and is finding these. What happens? Well, the people who need the drugs for the sales and are sent to pick it up, and through this group of different people, the park rangers, punk kids, our leads who are trying to find these drugs, it is just becomes a madhouse. There's extreme violence. There are cubs, and there is one of the final big feature film performances from Ray Liotta, which we are absolutely going to talk about. So this movie is wild. I would say that it is a very funny movie, but it is also a graphic movie. There was one time in the theater where I did wince, and I'm pretty versed, and I was like, oh, that was tough on the big screen. Yeah, so we'll talk about it. Now, I had probably overhyped this movie to you guys because it's very obvious when I really like a movie, because I'm like, we're gonna do it, and it takes forever, and then it's tired by the time we get there. Mandy, what were you expecting from Cocaine Bear, and what did you get now that you've seen it?
I was expecting a bear, I was expecting cocaine, and I was expecting a bear on cocaine, and I got all of those things, so I was very happy.
It is true. The bear in question, of course, is 3D animated. It's interesting because the tone of the movie, this is one of those cases where the fact that the bear goes to a slight cartoonishness sometimes, not heavy, but overly human facial expressions on occasion, or
Yes.
wild.
Yeah.
It works because it's exaggerating the fact that this bear is
I
a
think it also
cokehead.
like does a line at one point, or
Yes, it
like, and
does.
then like there's one point where they like animated like a cloud coming out of its nose, or
Yes,
just really ridiculous stuff. But I thought it was super fun that they
it
were
is.
just playing with the whole idea of it like to the absolute extreme.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and just like they didn't hold back anywhere. They were just like, how crazy can we make it? And then let's put it up several more notches from there.
Which is totally totally fantastic. And we will you'll already have listened to the episode that we'll have for our thankful and hateful, our kind of yearly Thanksgiving vibe episode, but it's good to listen to any time of year. Bad marketing to label something for just one holiday, but you'll have heard me talk about the fact that a lot of things don't take risks, and this movie,
Mhm.
it had no, it went, for a crude term, it went balls deep. Okay, I'm pulling something that Tad would probably say on this pod. It is one of those things where they went 100% without any. They're like, look, this is going to be ridiculous, so let's make it more ridiculous than you would think. For example, as you said, the bear does a line, and I love, so IMDb, it's always fun to check what they put there. Whoever
Mhm.
wrote the synopsis is blah 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 blah. A huge black bear goes on a murderous rampage after unintentionally ingesting coke. I take umbrage with that because I don't think the bear was unintentionally ingesting coke. The bear intentionally went and found that, and then intentionally ingested cocaine every
Yes.
chance it got, and hunted
Yes.
down people for more cocaine. It
Yes.
is fantastic. All right, that's a fair cocaine and a bear. You got it. Tad,
Yes.
what were
Got
you
it. That's
expecting
right.
from this movie?
Complex question. The answer is, I heard a lot of good stuff about this movie beforehand, and this movie exceeded my expectations because I sort of expected it. You know what this movie reminded me of from its marketing was Snakes on a Plane.
Yeah.
You remember Snakes on a Plane? Do you remember how shit Snakes on a Plane
Yes.
actually was as a film
Yes.
once you watched it? Like you watched
Yeah.
it and you're like, wow, this sucks.
Yeah, it was
This,
entertaining for like it was a title. That was the
yes, it
device,
was a title
like,
and a premise. And the
and
problem
Samuel
is
L.
that
Jackson.
yes, and the movie spent so much time actually explaining its premise that it got boring. This movie keeps it simple, but it also the framing story around the fact that there is a bear high as shit on cocaine is more interesting than the bear.
It's engaging. Yeah, it's actually a movie with the bear as
That's
a driving
that's
force in the
key.
film.
As a matter of
Yes.
fact, that edgy part, you know what is really edgy about a movie in 2023 that would have almost seemed impossible actually to do in the 80s, which is really funny to think about, is watching kids do cocaine or
Oh,
attempt to do
right,
cocaine. Can you
right.
imagine
Wow.
them trying
I
that back in
know.
the 80s?
In the
Holy
70s,
shit.
it would have flown. The 80s, it would have never happened, even though everybody with any sort of money who was an adult in the 80s was doing cocaine. We all
Nancy
learned that from
Reagan
Die
would have
Hard.
shit herself
Oh, yeah.
watching kids do cocaine in a movie. She'd have
Yeah.
been like, no, stop this right now. This movie is banned. But in 2023, you can do it because the scene was done in a way where you're like, the kids aren't actually in danger and it's part of the plot. So it kind of passed. At the same time, you know, like, especially as, you know, as parents, you're kind of like, well, 2 out of 3 of us are parents. So you understand, like, I don't want my kid doing cocaine, but at the same time, it's like, those dumb kids, they're doing
Yeah.
cocaine and they're all like, oh, this is gross. And it's like, yeah, that's how kids at that age would be like, this stuff's gross. I'm not doing this again. It's like,
Yeah.
wait 10, 15 years, kids, you'll find out. But
I also love the line where he's like, "Oh, a tablespoon should be enough."
Oh my God.
they're eating it off a knife,
These
which is
two,
even
yeah.
edgier.
So we're talking about these two kids, a boy and a girl, friends, who go into the woods, and they're kind of one of them wants to be bad, right? And the other one just wants to be good, and just like, I don't really want to rock the boat. But they find this and is like, this is drugs, and they break it open, and yeah, and then they're like, let's do it. How do you do it? And of course, neither of them really knows anything about it. So they're taking don't they take it orally, a spoonful of cocaine?
Yes, they
Yeah.
literally scoop it off a knife and try and eat it.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Yeah, which is, and then of course, and then the effect is that they're high and weird, and they are trying to survive a bear, right, with the help of the mom and some other characters. Which there are a lot of characters in this film, but I actually didn't feel like it was. I shouldn't say that. It feels like there's a lot of characters. There's not very many people in this movie. However, the people that are there all get a substantial amount of time compared to what most, side characters would get, which is
That's true.
another great thing, right?
everyone gets enough development where you can even feel, and this is really important in a film, you can even feel sympathy in certain circumstances for the shit people.
Right.
Like
And there are a lot of shit
Ray
people.
Liotta's character, you can
Yeah.
understand his motivation. He's still a shitbag, but you can at least understand that he's trying to protect his family,
Yeah.
because he's like, oh my god, these Colombians will kill me, they will
Mhm.
kill you. So he acts like a shitbag.
Right. And
He's
he's
a
a
bad
cold-blooded
dad.
murderer. He's not a good guy.
Yeah,
but
he's not a
he
good
also
dude.
so he's the father of one of our two, I would say, two main leads in this movie, who, by the way, the person that plays his son is Alden Ehrenreich, who I fell in love with as Han Solo in Solo, a Star Wars movie.
And he doesn't even look it. Like,
No,
you
he
can tell
doesn't.
he's older.
Yep.
It's
And
5 years since then.
he does a great job. And so he's the one, his wife recently died, he has a kid, and he doesn't want to be part of his dad's business anymore because his wife didn't like it, so he doesn't want to do it. He's at the beginning of the movie, he's David, who is his friend O'Shea Jackson, plays him, who is still in the business, right? He's like, look, you got to stop drinking and come with me because your dad's telling us to do this. We got to do it. And so he eventually drags him out and goes to do it. What's lovely about it is that his horrible, murderous monster drug dealer dad, Ray Liotta, is also watching his kid. He's watching Eddie, Alden's character. He's watching his son. So Alden is drinking himself stupid, missing his wife, and wants to get out of the business and is mad at his dad for being like the business. And yet his son is staying with his grandpa, who is clearly like not a great grandpa, but doesn't seem like he has any sort of like, he's going to take care of his grandson, and he also, as you said, you do kind of feel he does seem to really care about his son. It's not like he throws his son to the wolves, because he could have several times in the movie to his own benefit, but he doesn't do that. That's not his goal. And his Ray Liotta's character is Sid, but it doesn't really matter. You just know he's the dad.
It's
And
an old school mentality. You can
Yeah.
understand it. It's still shitty, but you can understand it.
He's kind of like a more like down to earth country version of his character in Goodfellas, right? What
Yeah.
he became in Goodfellas. So it was really great to see him, and in a role where he got to play a real character, because for so long Ray Liotta he went from sort of like the lead, sometimes handsome man, to being the like scary guy. Like he in his last, God, what, 2 decades of acting, he was almost always the villain, the scary guy. And in this, he's a villain. He's not, I don't think he's scary. And in some weird way, he's kind of engaging, right? He's the con man you like. He's the bad character that you like because he's down to earth and he talks in a way that sort of, it's familial enough that you start to buy into him being engaging.
He's one or two good decisions away from redemption, but you know he's not
Yes.
going to get there.
That is fantastic way to put it. That is fantastic. Yes. And so, yeah, so it's a lot of fun. He plays a great character. As I said, O'Shea Jackson plays Eddie's, his son's friend, who's in the business, and it's O'Shea Jackson Jr. And he does a great job. He has a very strong presence. Like, he really is a co-lead. He's not just the best friend. He is a co-lead. And he has the first fight scene, one of the only fight scene in the movie, when they get to the park where they're going to go in and try and find the coke, which, by the way, would be a hell job because it's just scattered in bags all throughout the woods. And he gets attacked by these three like hillbilly punk kids, and he just, because he's a gangster, he just beats the living shit out of them. One of them pulls a knife and stabs him in the back, and he just continues to beat the shit out of him and then berates them for being bad kids, basically. And is like, you better shape up. And he pulls the knife out and leaves. Like,
or just like, he's like, it's like he kind of, I guess he knows it's there, but he kind of doesn't. He's just like, what is this? And he turns around and he sees the knife like in the mirror, and he's like, what the fuck? He's my shirt. Like,
I really liked this jersey.
Yes.
I like this jersey. Yeah.
And obviously,
yeah, he's so funny.
If you've listened to this pod, you're going to get spoilers, but who cares? There's no way if any of this sounds entertaining, you could hear every single beat of this movie and still have a good time watching it. And then he also, Alden and his character get in a gun standoff with the police detective, I believe he is, who's trying to track down Ray Liotta's operation. Okay. So, and he's played by Isaiah Whitlock Jr., who people may not know his name, but everybody will recognize him. He plays the police officer, and who unfortunately gets killed by said Ray Liotta, of course. But he shoots off O'Shea's character's finger. And it's this weird setup.
Like two fingers.
Yes. I want to know what the script said, specifically the shooting script, because it's a weird setup where the police officer is on top of a gazebo, thank you, and the other characters are down below. Alden's character Eddie is out in the open and has no weapon. He's out in the open, and then at some point, O'Shea gets his fingers blown off, and then is like, "Can I get my fingers?" Like, and the police officer's like, "Yes, you can get your fingers, but don't make a move or I'll shoot you." And he lets him go get his fingers. At which point, the cocaine bear comes into the scene and is so tripped out, she just like falls, just passes out on top of the character of Eddie. And they are just trying to figure out what to do to get him out from under this bear. And as the synopsis I read from IMDb said, this is a black bear. It's not supposed to be a grizzly. For those of you out there who aren't very familiar with bears, black bear does not mean they are always colored black. There are brown colored black bears. They're just a species or whatever, a type of bear that are much smaller than grizzlies. They're the ones much more common here in the United States. And so it was a giant black bear. This is an unnaturally large black bear. It's more like a grizzly. But it's great. And this is one of those times when the exaggerated features and actions of the bear really play into it. It's a movie moment that's been done before, usually to stupid effect by having the fat guy fall on a character passed out, or the character, a villain or a character gets killed and he's huge and he falls on somebody and they have to get him out or something. It's that, but it's a bear on cocaine. Like, it's much funlier this way.
Just crashed.
Just
like
crashed
on top of a person.
Yes. And it's the light. And this
and
is
they like check to see if the bear's alive.
Yes, they don't know if
they're like, it's just so funny. It just keeps going on and on. It's like one of those jokes where you're like, oh, okay, like this has to be the end of this joke, and they're like, oh no, we're gonna do more.
They milk it, but
Yeah.
this movie is never boring. And Tad, you kind of got to this about the story, the actual story that the bear is just a driving a plot motivator for, which is that is as engaging as any of the action scenes, perhaps more sometimes. The characters' interactions are great. You end up loving Eddie and David, like the lead characters. The two these are two guys who've sold cocaine to or provided cocaine to a seller that's done God knows what to get there, and yet you don't just root for them, you actually really like them, especially David, even though he's the one that does not want to get out of the business because he likes the money. But he's clearly a complicated character who is, you would call him a good person, which is interesting because his line of work is not something we would identify with a good person.
I wouldn't consider my line of work to be something a good person would do, but I would like to think that I try to do good things. But like my job, I don't do good things all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I we've talked about it briefly on this pod before. We all, of course, have day jobs. If you think your podcasters don't, then and they're not famous, then you're wrong. They do have day jobs, or they're unemployed and living in someone else's house, which, hey, is a possibility. We've all been there too. But yeah, I'm an English professor, and I will say this: as much as I love education, as far as like the actual concept, like learning things that you care about, being made to care about something by getting information you didn't know before, understanding things and people, it's wonderful. But the college system is a broken, oppressive wreck. Not only in this country, but others, but especially in this country. And I do not support the system in place that crushes people financially. My debt will be with me. I have to pretend forever because otherwise it's too oppressive. And so out there, I'm not saying don't go to college, but be aware of what you want to do and then decide if college is the path forward for you. And if you do want to go to something like, say, creative writing, which is what I have, or theater, anything like that, feel free to go, but maybe try and get some money. Of course, go for scholarships, but God knows there's not enough. Work for the college, work there, and don't get a work study job. Okay, I'm not saying that. That's fine if you do it. Get a job before you attend, because those jobs will have much better benefits for you for taking classes. Some may even be free for the programs. Okay,
fun advice for our young people. Nathan and I have both worked in the college system. The best way to get a cheap education, work for education.
And even if you hate it, you only got to be there for 2 to 6
until
years
you graduate.
Program. Right, and then you're out. You can get out, and you can wave your middle finger on the way out, because the people that are going to be there are not going to be there that long anyway, and no one will remember you if you ever want to get another job there. Personally,
just like high school.
Yeah, high school, by the way, doesn't matter at all, and
it doesn't.
Not even a little bit.
Your permanent record doesn't exist.
Stupidest thing ever. Anyway, okay, here you go. So we all have things we don't like about our job. Mandy actually works as an engineer for like a medical transportation company. So there's someone who's actually doing good in our group. So, supporting the hierarchical medical establishment.
I used to work for medical technology. Guess what?
Yeah.
It's still shit.
I was going to say, like, my job, being the person that develops the technology that delivers vaccines that are very, divisive, like generating subject matter.
You mean the technology that transports nanotechnology from Bill Gates to take over our minds? Right. Like that episode of SpongeBob SquarePants where Plankton activates the buckets over everybody's head. Yeah. So it's just, this is a weird world. It's always weird. But now that we can talk to everyone. Some people would
think I'm kind of the worst, right? They're like, you're supporting the man, like microchipping us, or like.
Don't you just wish that you could carry around vaccine and darts and just every time you find someone that's obnoxious that way, just huck a dart at it and be like, ha, wait for the trigger words.
I got my blowgun.
Yeah. The next time you say snowflake, you're going to be in my power. So it's insanity. So anyway, Jobs are complicated, and so is adulthood. But you love these main characters. There's other characters too, as I said, the two children played Dee Dee, who's played by Brooklyn Prince, and Henry by Christian Convery. And they're the next group, the next person that is perhaps one of the best like little side characters in this film is played by Margot Martindale, that is Ranger Liz, who
Oh
is the
gosh.
park ranger who is trying to hook up with is it Jesse Tyler Fergus's character that he's trying to hook up with? I can't remember the character. I watched this. We put this off for several weeks.
It's like the wildlife guy
Yes.
who comes in,
Yes.
he's gonna check out the park, and they're gonna go, I don't know if he's
So
like trapping
she's
stuff, but
really
they're gonna
into
go
it.
do a nature walk, and he's
So yeah,
like really
so she deals with the punk kids and everything, and she's her own hilarious character. She's getting in, you know, it's like she's getting ready for a date, but really she's getting ready to just like see this guy who comes up. And it is not only is she hilarious, but then she triggers some of the most heinous violence in the movie by, you know, at one point she shoots one of the kids in the head by accident, and we get this is where Elizabeth Banks like visualization is really stellar, because we get it as a shot from the front of the person who gets shot with Ranger Liz behind, and she's not really revealed until the shot removes a chunk of this guy's head, at which point we see her. It is a disgusting master shot. And it's not like we haven't had something similar. There's a very commonly done shot now, which is fun, where someone, you know, gets shot or hit in the stomach with something terrible and a hole opens up and then you see the person through it. This is better because this is more visceral and it's a little more, and even though the kid is obnoxious and awful, and I didn't miss him at all. He's the one that stabbed David. It is an extreme end for this character, and sort of, I would say, unexpected. Even if you had a thought, because you do have a thought when somebody brandishes a gun in one of these movies, right? You're like, oh, is it going to be a Stephen King? Are they going to be their own worst enemy in this group? And it is, but it's still the pacing.
She never strikes you as particularly good at her job or using a gun.
Also,
so
completely
you're like,
not
this
apologetic.
is gonna go bad.
Completely not apologetic about it.
Yeah.
And so it's a delight, and the bear just wreaks havoc when she comes around. The movie opens with these two, I don't know if they're supposed to be Swedish or I can't remember, German. I can't remember what, if they say where they're from, but this middle, I don't know, youngish, late 30s, our age couple are in the woods backpacking, and they're like, oh look, it's beautiful, it's a bear, and it's this peaceful looking nature bear. And then of course when it hears them and turns, its expression totally changes, and it's the cocaine bear, and it attacks them, and you assume they're murdered or ripped apart. Later in the movie you find the survivor, who is the man, and his girlfriend was ripped apart, or his wife or whatever. And it's these weird, it's one of those movies where it's actually how would you even call it? So we have the films, we've talked about this before, like Stand By Me and the Weirdsies, where it's a journey film, right? Like a road trip movie, where it's got a linear setup, and there's these stops on the way that introduce new concepts or wraps or reveal things or introduce characters that then reveal things for the leads. A movie like this is sort of, you took that and you held it up like a string of nerds rope, and you just put your fingers on it and pulled it down and just ripped off all of those nerds into a bowl. That's the nerds are the characters. I know it's a weird metaphor, but I'm hungry and I want a nerd's rope.
I'm glad you actually said that, because I was starting to get some Stand By Me vibes from this movie, but also by the end I got Goonies vibes too, because they were kind of like, was it a cave? I can't remember, but it was definitely like,
no, they go into a cave. They go into a cave at the end, and they come, the backside of the cave comes out under the waterfall that the kids had played hooky to go and
they all jump in the end, just like in the Goonies.
Yeah. Well, notice that both of those movies, I mean, Stand By Me is not necessarily considered a kids movie. They're both movies that are, frankly, what we would dub now as family films, right?
I would say coming of age, but yeah, sure.
Yes, but they're you know, often they're the ones that, you know, until they're questionable morals for people who are really upset about it. And I'm not talking about progressives, by the way, for the most part, but they're movies that they could show in a classroom in the early 90s, late 80s, right? Like they're the movies that, the year after you watch Milo and Otis or Homeward Bound, which makes me sob, right? Like the next year, maybe it's Hoosiers or maybe Goonies, right? Or maybe it could be Stand By Me. So like these things, these are both kids, and that's the sensibility in this movie, is this goofiness that even when you have like real characters, the overall tone, even with the extreme violence, and there's a scene of facial road rash of someone, I'm not even
Oh,
tied to a
oh,
to a medical
To
stretcher.
a gurney.
Yeah, to a gurney, face first, being drugged along the asphalt. That's the one that made me wince in the theater. And I
yeah,
mean, I've
that
seen
was
the
bad.
effects before, but it's rough. And I
Yeah.
appreciate them doing that, because again, it's sort of that old, it's sort of like keeping them honest as a filmmaker, right? You're going to go all the way in all these areas and then you're going to pull back, right? Then you're
Mhm.
going to pull back on something. If you're going to do it all the way. Give me something that surprises me. And you're dreading it, right? Because you know something bad's going to happen at so many steps in this movie.
You hear that,
You just,
Danzig? You hear
huh?
that, Danzig?
Yeah, right, right, right. Every
I-
scene is engaging, either because it actually has character interaction that's both funny and revealing, or it's an action set piece that you know something bad's going to happen. You're waiting to find out how, and it's rarely, in fact, it's never in the way I totally expected it to be. Um, and that's, there's no and I love Grizzly and Day of the Animals, those 80s films. It's never the the bear pops up and then whacks them and they die. That's not how this
Mhm.
operates. Like that happens, I'm sure, but like it's not we're not bothering to show you that thing you expect. We're instead going to show you a bear clinging to the side of an emergency van, or, like these insane things that are happening. um this is a time when I want to mention too, that you'll see this on the posters, had it for a long time, although I think they eventually removed it, and people say based on a true story. It is inspired by a true story for sure, and the story unfortunately is sad in my opinion. There was cocaine dropped in the woods, and a bear did get involved in it and did way too much of it and died. Okay, had a heart attack, which is what you do when you have an insane
Mhm.
amount of a speed or an amphetamine or cocaine, whatever, an upper, like those products. So that's sad in that way. And Elizabeth Banks also produced a mini documentary about it, which I believe is on the Cocaine Bear physical edition, and you can rent it separately, which is, it's interesting. It's sort of like giving the bear its due, right? And that's what I actually loved about this movie. It made me sad knowing the real story, but at the same time, I was also like, not that the bear would prefer this to be the way. I would love to have the bear alive instead and just have no movie. Okay, that would be nice. But I'm glad that this movie, the bear wins, frankly. I mean, there are survivors, but
Mhm.
the bear survives. And not only does it survives with its cubs. And it's a delight. It's a complicated delight because they're all addicted to cocaine, but it is a delight. And I mean, it's one of those movies where I would love a sequel. I don't know how it would be done to the effect this was done, so I don't necessarily endorse one being produced. But maybe if Elizabeth Banks signed back on and Jimmy Warden, who wrote this film, signed back on, if you may not recognize that name, although some will. He wrote The Babysitter, and he's married to Samara Weaving, who people may know from Ready or Not, which was not that long ago. And he The Babysitter has a similar sense of like dark humor. I think this is more successful because, and you can watch The Babysitter and the sequel on Netflix, I believe, is where they premiered. But the humor here is also wrapped around a very engaging story, and it's also even. I think Elizabeth Banks probably had a good deal to do with that. The movie does not feel mispaced at any time for me, which is such a rarity even among fantastic films, right? Pacing is such a complicated thing in film. Because it requires understanding by the director, it requires a script that is effectively paced, which is so hard to tell when it's on the page, right? Even as the writer. And then it requires editors who are good at their job and work with the director if the director's competent. It requires all those things to line up to get a movie that is engaging, and there's not a single scene where I'm like, ugh, right? Like it could be in the hands of somebody else or with a different script, other than Warden's, or a changed script heavily, it could be that every time the kids come on, I was like, ugh, move along. Like that happens all the time, right? Every time there's some character in most of these ensemble films that is like the one you just don't care about. Nobody is flat, and nobody has so little time that you're disappointed when you go back to them, right? You're always waiting to see what's
Oh, speaking of like characters that we should go back to, is we never even mentioned the mom. She was amazing.
She's
She
great.
was so hilarious. She was so great. She was such a mom. Like she's just like,
Carrie
I gotta get
Russell.
my kid.
Yeah,
Like,
who's
you might
fantastic.
be like this crazy big drug kingpin, but like, I go get my kids.
Yeah.
Like, get out of my way. Like, don't mess with me.
Yeah, she's great. She was Felicity in the TV show Felicity. Was probably her biggest role, but she's also been in a lot of stuff. She was in Mission Impossible 3. I'm not a fan of the Mission Impossible films. Maybe we'll talk about those one day. I'll do a De Palma pairing. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, she played Ellie, so she's not too. She's definitely recognizable. She also was in the last Star Wars film. Okay, she was Zori Bliss in Rise of Skywalker. So it all comes back to Star Wars, Tad. So anyway, she's a great actress. And yes, it was sort of like they made her the final girl, but she's an actual woman instead of a girl, right? The final girl in a horror movie being the one that ultimately is sort of the last person standing who defeats, Jason Voorhees or something. You know what I mean? That's sort of, she's the Jamie Lee Curtis of Halloween, right? The ones that are the victims until they are pushed into a corner or have a breaking point when they become, combatants on an equal footing with their tormentor. And in this case, it's almost like we don't even ever get to that point because she is never not strong and competent. And it's nice to see that. And I have to say, I don't know that you would get that, at least that strong a sense, with a male director. I just don't. And here's why I say that. It's not because a male director can't try to be even-handed, but it's very difficult to operate in a different space than your perspective, and you, because you don't even see the border of your perspective, right? You think you're moving outside of it, but you're not all the time. So a male director trying to do justice to a female character will often do one, they'll just fail and the character is somehow flat. Like, for example, I mean, I'm not even going to mention, there's so many directors who cannot really make a female character real, right, or engaging. They're just flat, especially, they're just the hot one or whatever. However, they also will overcorrect sometimes when they're trying to make someone strong. For example, and I don't think this is a huge dramatic overreach, but the April O'Neil character in the Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem by Seth Rogen, we're told we're supposed to like her, and I didn't totally dislike her, but Corinne didn't like her, and I totally see why. She's kind of too cool for school, right? She's too aloof. She's too, it doesn't matter. And there's no vulnerability, and it becomes an unreal character. It's the same mistake as the manic pixie girl, right? You're becoming a caricature and you have no reality set in, and that can be a problem too. But Elizabeth Banks doesn't do that. Every character has an equal chance to be either a total shithead or a winner, or, as Tad said, 2 degrees separation from either way, right? Which is the most interesting part. That's a conflict for us. And so it's really fun, really nice to have that. And you root for the bear, which is kind of, I think, what slasher films, which I think a Wild Animal Attacks film is often modeled after a slasher film rather than any other kind of horror movie, even a creature feature, right? Because they tend to be more of the pop up out of nowhere, right? Where a creature feature often tends to have some element of, look how crazy this creature looks, right? The reveal. We don't get that here. It's more like a Michael Myers. We see him early on. We know what he looks like. It's the shock surprise of him showing up, or the reveal of a terrible thing he did that causes the terror and the tension. That's how Cocaine Bear is treated. So I would call this a slasher film in that way. We have a character that you actually like and you want to see more of in the bear. As Tad said, the bear is not the core part of this movie. It's the core catalyst and device that pushes along the plot, which is wonderful, because when you have a character that's that device, you don't feel as artificial, because the character you can make a character that will make the choices necessary to get you where your other characters need to be for the movie to come full circle. So it's a smart move. It's something that a lot of good scripts do, and it's something that a good slasher film almost always succeeds at. You know, Jason, the best Jason movies are the ones where you want to see the character so much that you're actually rooting for them against the leads. And while there's a lot of leads that you don't want to die in this movie, you always have that tension of like, who's going to be next, right? What's the bear going to do that's going to cause this problem? And that's the exciting part. You want the bear there because the bear is going to cause something crazy to happen. It's the moment of tension, knowing the bear is going to do something or cause something. And that's like a slasher flick.
This movie perfects something that I've been complaining a lot with a lot of and it's not, I don't want to criticize, people who are essentially amateur filmmakers too harshly, but this is a perfection of that formula where that tension is really important. If you do not have that, you don't care. Mm-hmm. Like, how many movies have we watched where it's like someone's going around and I'm just like, yep, who cares, I don't care about any of these characters. Right. You have to care about the characters that are getting killed. You have to be, I mean, a good slasher film, I guess, and I could be wrong, you must at least have that conflict where you're like, well, I don't necessarily want them to die, but I'm not going to feel too bad if they do. This movie did really well with that, where the ones who you absolutely do not want to die didn't die, and the ones that did, you're like, I didn't want them to, but at the same time, they're kind of shitty enough where it's kind of okay.
Yeah.
And then you have to self-reflect of like, am I a bad person for wanting these people to die?
Right. It's the push and pull, right? You're like, okay, as long as this person makes it, okay, and then it's a new person, right? Like, and also, you mentioned a great thing. You need to care for the character, and it doesn't mean you need to like the character. You can care about whether they are punished or not, right? So you want a character to be punished, just like you may want another character to be safe, because you have to have some sort of emotional reaction or attachment to the character. It doesn't have to be good. That's something I think a lot of people are like, especially in like screenings. I'm going back and revisiting some big bombs, like The Bonfire of the Vanities, trying to beef up into Palma's filmography, because I never really, frankly, liked most of De Palma's films, and learning, inadvertently sort of learned some things about him. And I was like, oh, going back and watching them, I see now the vision that makes it interesting. I didn't catch it the first time. I don't know that means it's going to be successful just because I know that, but I think it's fascinating, right? And you have this sort of, you need the Batman and Joker, which is, I think, what else you're getting at. The final girl has to be up to the task. Even if they didn't seem it at first, they have to be elevated. They have to rise and change to the task of opposing the other figure that you like. So you have to care about both, right? You want the supernatural killer to continue killing because they're so, you have that id moment, like you're sort of cathartically seeing them, and they're so mysterious. It's that whole like, oh, the ultimate bad boy or bad girl, whatever. It's a crazy thing that we do, but that is something we do, right? We get cathartic, and whether or not we really want to kill someone, we sort of have this pleasure response to seeing this sort of play out on screen. And with the other side, the ones that are against the enemy, you have to feel the opposite, right? You have to feel survive. Do this, why don't you stop? Don't scream, push him. Like, why would you do this? And that's what made Laurie Strode, the Jamie Lee Curtis character in the best of the Halloween films, so effective. She is, she's not a fighter, it seems, at the beginning, but then when it comes up, she does not hesitate. Right? She is going to protect herself. She is going to survive. There's the movie, which my wife loves, which I was super happy to learn about. One of the MTV productions called Stage Beauty, which is, there's this great moment at the end where we're learning that it's about the transition between when men stopped playing women in English theater. And we get this moment where Claire Danes, I believe it is like, why would Othello's wife would not just sit there and let herself be killed? That's such a misunderstand. That's you're basically you're eliminating the humanity of this female character. And so when it's played as an actual murder, like she's trying to survive, it becomes haunting, right? Because you're witnessing something. It takes it to that level where now you're uncomfortable because you're seeing the reality of what you've been hoping for with all of these characters, right? And if you put that in, it changes the whole tone of the movie. This one doesn't do that. It knows its tone is going to be slight discomfort and raunchy fun, and it wants you to be just uncomfortable enough that you're like, ugh, but you don't have to feel bad about yourself, right? And so it's just fun. Like, I think this movie was just fun. It reminded me, Tad, you got a great point about the films you said it reminded you of. It reminded me of Alexander Aha's remake of Piranhas, right? With Jerry O'Connell, some other ones. It's hyper. I mean, the violence at one point in that movie makes this one look like an episode of Caillou, right? But like, it's a fun movie, and there are moments of tension and shock, but the overall tone is not serious enough. It's not goofy enough to be a slapstick, ridiculous joke fest, but it's not serious enough to make you disgusted with yourself, you know? That's so important. It's important to be entertained and feel good. And when you can make someone feel good after watching a movie where a bear who does drugs murders strangers, like, that's a huge success. So I think we can move on to recommendations. I'll start, as I often do, because I can't contain myself. I recommend this film. If you don't like if you can't handle blood or any violence at all, this is not going to be the movie for you, because there is some blood and violence, and there's one or two scenes that you may get nauseated by. That said, it's got a great cast, a really good cast. There's not a single character in this movie that isn't, I don't think that's not effective at their job. And everyone gets some sort of little special moment to their character that makes them memorable. There's even a female cop who's sort of a dirty cop, who we just get a couple of scenes with her, but she has personality, right? And she makes her own decision at the end that's not beholden to anybody else. And so, like, I think that's great. I don't know, what level the scriptwriter or Elizabeth Banks had in some of these things, but it's a success. And I yearn to be a cast member in a movie like this, as rare as they are, where no matter what role you have, you are important. You are somebody that you could go, oh, that was me in Cocaine Bear, and somebody who'd watch it be like, oh, that's so great. I love that scene when you blah, blah, blah. Everybody has a moment. And it's wonderful. We get that. Robert Rodriguez does that too, to a certain extent. He loves putting in these side characters for like 5 to 10 minutes. And we may only get them for 5 to 10 minutes, but they're memorable. Like Danny Trejo is the knife-throwing assassin in Desperado, right? He has very little time on screen, but he has...
Wait, do you hear that, Danzig?
It's so true, right? Like, don't waste any screen time. Don't waste any character. Don't waste any opportunity to add interest to a character, right? Why would you do that? The drag queen Willem says, like, she wears like sometimes a gold tooth, right? Because she's like, any opportunity for bling. I don't necessarily like the way the choice looks all the time, but she's taking that idea of, why would I do anything less than I can? Why would I make anything about me less interesting, right? Even if somebody doesn't like it, they're noticing it, right? So I love that concept applied to a movie, and I think this movie does it expertly. So I recommend this movie. Plus, like I said, it's just fun. If you don't mind a little gore in your homies, watch this movie. If you don't think Elizabeth Banks is a good filmmaker, watch this movie, because I guarantee you will be proved wrong. I've only met one person who's a horror fan who hasn't liked this movie. And it was more personal preference, according to them, which I understand. If you don't like any sort of comedy in your horror, this is funny. It's a funny movie. And it also has a lot of not horror. You've got characters that are actually being developed and have moments where they just have conversations, right? But I think it's worth a try. Definitely watch it. I was blown away in the theater. I did not expect to think so highly of this movie. Mandy, would you recommend Cocaine Bear? And if so, why and to who?
I absolutely would. And I'll go back to like what I expected and what I got. There is a bear. There's cocaine. There's a bear on cocaine. Like, I mean, we just spent almost an hour talking about all the other positive aspects of this actually being a movie
Yeah.
with a plot and good characters and like an interesting concept and a female director and all that stuff are all other reasons to see it. But I mean, you're getting what's in the title, like to full effect. So go enjoy it.
Right. How could you be mad, right? I it reminds me, so this movie came out shortly after the James Wan produced Megan, about the like life-size robot doll. And I went in
Creepy
to see,
doll.
yeah, I went in to see that film not expecting a whole lot, but being hopeful,
Mhm.
and I actually enjoyed it. I thought for the most part it was pretty decent. In fact, the part that I thought was the stupidest part that didn't make sense was the part that James Wan himself inserted, which was the dance scene, because it didn't make any sense to the whole plot. It just was a random dance scene. Worked great for marketing, so who's laughing now? But anyway, I thought that was a decent movie and I was surprised. So when this came out and I was going to see it, I just thought it would be terrible because I'm like, I was surprised by this one. This is just going to be like, I'm going to be trolled by buying a ticket to this movie, but that's okay, right? As a cult film fan, we kind of enjoy that sometimes. And then I was like, oh no, this is a good movie. It's not just decent. This is a good film. It is so much more than what you would think it was. And I think it's more than the sum of its parts, because when you have all those good moments, you put them together, you get something great. So, Tad, would you recommend Cocaine Bear 2023? If so, why and to who?
This is one of the rare moments when I can say that I don't have a lot to criticize about. Nitpicky, sure. Visually, maybe just aesthetically, this movie suffers from the same problem I see other movies recently try to do with nostalgia bait, where they try to emulate the 80s without doing a fantastic job, but it wasn't really trying all that hard to be an 80s retro movie, because
you could
it was
instantly
trying
forget
to,
that it was in the 80s. The only
yeah,
reason
because
is
it
because there's
doesn't
no cell
matter.
phones, right? Yeah.
Like the story would be as relevant if it happened 2 years ago as it would 30 years ago. So ultimately, that I get, it doesn't matter. It's just they tried a little bit. They threw in a few 80s things and it's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Inspired by a true story. You know what else was inspired by a true story? Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That is right. That is right.
How accurate was that?
Not at all.
Not at all.
We got one person who killed people dressed as a clown and ate people, and it became a family of cannibals who run a roadside restaurant slaughterhouse, and they have a big mentally underdeveloped individual who wears people's skin and puts makeup on it, who wields a chainsaw.
And then Rob Zombie decided to remake it and rename it.
Yeah,
which,
I mean,
to be fair, was good.
Yeah, it was. It was a different vision. And again, he went for it. He said, this is my aesthetic. I'm going to push it to 110%, because why would I do it halfway?
And he did it well. It was sort of groundbreaking for his career. Moving on. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed this. This was a breath of fresh air, because ever since the last movie I'd actually seen in theaters, up until recently, was Endgame. And Endgame was at least a small amount of disappointment for me, but at the same time, that was kind of to me, that was really the end of what was like everything that happened with superheroes from 1998 all the way up until that point.
Agreed.
And as far as I was concerned, it pretty much was over at that point.
Agreed.
It's just that apparently Disney didn't get the memo that it was over. And so when this came out, it was like, wow, all these movies have been shit over the past few years, and this thing just came in and went,
yeah,
fuck you.
Well, guess what? We're a new property that has nothing to do with anything else, and we're awesome.
This is exactly, and I've been hearing a lot of people talk about this. This is the stuff that sort of needs to carry the torch forward if we're going to actually enjoy movies for the next few decades. Is you need to scale back, you need to have reasonable budgets, and you also need to have talent behind it that can actually carry it, because this was made on what, 30-35 million dollars,
not that much money.
Tripled it. It's kind of like this was made on Punisher 2004 money, looked better, was written better, and was more, actually no, it wasn't in any way faithful to the original source material, because that movie wasn't necessarily either, because no matter how many rose tinted Memories I have of Punisher 2004, no, wasn't super accurate. As much as I love Thomas Jane as the Punisher, that was not an accurate representation.
And just so you know, I know we've mentioned this on the podcast before. Tad and I have disagreements about this. We will be doing several Punisher pairings that I'm excited to talk about because there are
Warzone.
There's a lot to, some of us are looking forward to different things. Yes, so I totally agree with you. This is a breath of fresh air. And I cannot wait to talk next week about what we've paired it with, Slaughterhouse, because there have been, after Cocaine Bear, before it even hit theaters, you know, the cult schlock train is very good at seeing things that are going to be popular and shoveling out content that is various levels. Usually it's various levels of bad, but there's usually one or two gems in there, right? So we have Slaughterhouse. We also could have done Crackoon, the crack addicted raccoon. We could have done, what's another one? I can't even think about it. There's a deer one. There's many, right? There's many about that. So, and yes, we may talk about Crackoon at some
I was
point.
completely unaware of this entire subgenre of movies.
Yes, it is. Cocaine Bear created this. It moved from, you know, there's lots of killer animal movies, Black Sheep about
this never stopped.
No,
this is just the new gen.
Strippers versus, what is it? Strippers versus zombie beavers. Zombeaver, that's what it's called.
Yeah, Zombeavers. Jesus Christ.
Yes, we'll probably talk about that at some point too. So anyway, there's lots of those, but the addition of Drug Mania, I'm looking forward to Angel Dust Angelfish. I think that's going to be a big winner.
That's amazing.
I don't know.
That's
anyway,
amazing.
Yeah, PCP Pandas. There's all that would actually be pretty good. Anyway, yeah. I don't know. It's great. Go watch Cocaine Bear. If any of this, if you like any number of the films we talk about on this podcast, if you like cult films, if you like horror films, if you like funny, weird films, bizarreness, just watch Cocaine Bear. It's one of the rare examples where a cult film is backed enough by already known Hollywood talent that it slips into the mainstream, and it's actually that good. Like, it's great. Like, it deserved more than it got, and it got more than you would expect. So check it out. This is one that I'm going to own physical. I already do. It's behind me. I had to buy it because even though I wanted to support it, right? Not just because I love having physical media. I wanted to support this. So do what you can to rent it. It is available to watch if you have Amazon Prime for free. And otherwise, you can rent it or buy it at any number of places. Check it out. Thank you so much for listening to Cult and Classic Films podcast. Next week, we're going to talk about Animals Behaving Badly 2 with Slaughterhouse 2023, which you can watch on Hulu for free if you have Hulu. So it's not really free, but you know what I mean. And you can go ahead and do that if you want before we talk about it. So you can be all on board with us and decide whether or not we're smart or stupid, according to your opinions. Thank you. Please go to the Patreon, patreon.com/Cult and Classic Films, where you can, for as low as $20 a month, get exclusive high-def Blu-ray cult films sent to you every month that you cannot get anywhere else, shipping included. And we have a new $2 level, which gets you access to our exclusive podcast pre-shows, as well as additional content, behind-the-scenes photos, things like that we post just about every week, every other week. And you get access to the discounted member store at Patreon, which is you can buy films for a much bigger discount than you could from our cultandclassicfilms.com website, which is still great to visit. Thank you. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. Stay weird. And we'll be back next week. To play us out, as always, is the Chud with All About Evil. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Cult and Classic Podcast. This podcast is important to me, but what's more important are the rights, privileges, and freedom from violence of everyone in this country and in this world. And that means supporting Black Lives Matter. If you'd like to make a donation, please go ahead and visit cultandclassicpodcast.com, where we have a list of places you can donate and help out. And please stay safe.